දවස් 30ක්ම unlimited Netflix බලන්න. Unlimited data pack එකක් මුළු පවුලටම unlimited fun එකක් අරගන්න. අදම active කරගන්න.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, neck and neck. Expectations of a definite result dashed as US presidential race hots up as Trump calls foul.
A very sad group of people is trying to disenfranchise that group of people, and we won't stand for it. We will not stand.
And Biden willing to wait.
We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying the votes is finished. And it ain't over till every vote is counted.
Increasing numbers. Cases from the Minuwangoda and Paliagoda clusters pass the 8,000 mark as case in Kilinochchi completes island-wide virus effect. Keeping things running. The BOI issues a rigid set of new health and safety guidelines aimed at keeping export industries in operation through curfew. Public needs. Economic centres open for wholesale trade to cater to essential needs during curfew. All this and much more coming up on this Wednesday, the 4th of November 2020.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9.
Nava Sunlight Sakura. Then Dikukal Pavatina Sakura Mal Suandin.
Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanella Fernando. Moving on to your top stories for tonight. Sri Lanka confirmed its 24th COVID-19 death a short while ago, with the deceased being a 79-year-old woman. In another unwanted milestone, the total number of COVID-19 patients emerging from the country's latest COVID-19 clusters, the Minuwangoda Apparel Factory cluster and the Paliagoda Fish Market cluster, exceeded the 8,000 mark today. As a result, the total number of cases reported in Sri Lanka surged past 12,000 today. Meanwhile, among the COVID-19 infections are 263 police officers of various police stations across the country. 41 more officers of the Borella police were confirmed to have been infected with COVID-19. According to our correspondent, members of the public have been restricted from entering the Borella police premises. The National Operations Centre for Prevention of COVID-19 Outbreak states that 263 officers at police stations across the island have now been infected with the virus. Meanwhile, in Diathalava, an officer attached to the Criminal Investigation Department has been diagnosed with COVID-19. According to health authorities, associates of the infected police officer have been placed in self-isolation. Elsewhere in Mattakulia, 21 residents of the Muadura Uyana scheme and other residents living in the vicinity have also tested positive for the virus. All of them are contacts stemming from the Paliagoda cluster. Further, in Horana, another 23 employees of the Gurugoda Apparel Factory have been diagnosed with the virus. In addition, 3 employees of the Agalavata branch of the same factory have also tested positive for the coronavirus. Meanwhile, a further 11 infections were detected from the Sitavakapura Urban Council jurisdiction area in Avissavilla, identified as contacts of patients in the area. In Ahaliagoda, 8 associates of COVID-19 patients reported from the area have also tested positive for the virus. Among them is a cashier employed at a supermarket in the area. In more development, 6 Gramaniladari divisions of the Pannala MOH division have been declared as isolated zones. The isolated Gramaniladari divisions are Ihala Galayaya and Pahala Galayaya, Mookalana, Kohumbapola, Badabadavatta and Pannala. Meanwhile, over 50 families in the area who attended the funeral of the youth from Panadura who committed suicide and later tested positive for COVID-19 were directed to self-quarantine. According to health officials, steps were taken to isolate the entire area. Meanwhile, 2 women living in Udavalave who were infected with the virus have also been identified as contacts of the Paliagoda cluster. In Bhagavantalava, 3 members of the same family have also tested positive for the coronavirus. According to health authorities, all 3 tested positive while in self-isolation for having had contact with coronavirus patients within their family. In addition, 2 people who were placed under quarantine at the Muskelia Brownlow estate have also tested positive. The 2 were attendees of an almsgiving held in the area on the 4th of October, organised by a contact of the Paliaguda cluster. A COVID-19 infected fishmonger was also detected in Balapitiya yesterday, who was later identified as a contact of the Paliaguda cluster. The patient had attended a funeral in Hirevatta, Ambalangoda a week ago and had engaged in gambling at the location. Meanwhile, 409 new cases of COVID-19 were identified from the country yesterday. The majority of the cases reported yesterday were from the Gampaha district, amounting to 146. From among the rest, 122 were confirmed from the Colombo district, 47 from the Kalutara district, 19 from Gaul and 12 each from the districts of Kegaul and Ratnapura. In addition, 7 others were identified from the Kurunegala district, 6 from the Badulla district, 5 each from Hambantota and Kandy, 3 from the district of Putlam, 2 each from Mathale and Norelia, and 1 each from the Monaragala, Ampara and Batiklo districts. Health officials said that 10 infected persons among yesterday's infections are attached to various police stations across the island and the Special Task Force. The remaining 8 were identified at quarantine facilities. Yesterday's detections raised the number of infections from the Minuwangoda apparel factory cluster and the Paliaguda fish market cluster to 8,266. Among them, 1,041 patients are employees of the Minuwangoda apparel factory cluster, while the remaining 7,225 are their contacts. With 332 patients discharged from hospitals following complete recoveries, the number of recoveries from the Minuwangoda and Paliaguda clusters has risen to 2,160.
රෝගය යම් කිසි විදියකින් මීට කලින් තිබිච්ච අවස්ථාවට වඩා වේගෙන් පැතිරීමක් අපිට දකින්න පුළුවන්. ඒ වගේ කොළඹ මහනගර සභා සීමාව තුලත් ගම්පහ දිස්ත්‍රික්කයේ රෝගීන්ගේ වැඩිවීමේ ප්‍රවණතාවය තියෙනවා.
Since the beginning of the Minuwangoda outbreak, 3,660 cases have been reported from the Gampaha district, 2,284 from the district of Colombo, 380 from Kalutara, 183 from Kurunegala, 138 from Kegaul, 73 from the Putlam district, 94 from the Gaul district and 78 from the district of Ratnapura. Further, 56 patients have been reported from the Kandy district, 35 from the Batiklo district, 14 from the Hambantota district, 24 from Ampara, 20 from Mathale, 22 from Badulla, 30 from Norelia and 9 from the Monaragala district. Meanwhile, the total number of coronavirus infections reported in the country has increased to 12,018. Among them, 6,097 remain active and under treatment, while 5,858 have returned home following complete recoveries.
හරියටම ඊයේ දවස වෙනකොට මේ අලුතෙන් නිර්මාණය වෙලා තියෙන කොවිඩ් රැල්ල මාසික කාලයක් ගත වුණා. එතකොට මාසික කාලයක් ඇතුළත රෝගීන් 8,500කට ආසන්න ප්‍රමාණයක් මේ වෙනකොට වාර්තා වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේ මිනුවන්ගොඩ පොකුර ආරම්භ වෙනකොට රටේ හිටියේ රෝගීන් 3,500කට අඩු ගාණක්. එතකොට සමස්ත මාස 9ටම රෝගීන් 3,500යි, එක මාසයක් ඇතුළත රෝගීන් 8,500යි. එතකොට මේ මිනුවන්ගොඩ පෑලියගොඩ පොකුරු කෙතරම් තදින් රට තුල ව්‍යාප්ත වෙලා තියෙනවද කියලා කියන්න වෙන සාධක අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපි කතා කරමින් හිටියා කිලිනොච්චිය දිස්ත්‍රික්කයේ තුල රෝගීන් නැහැයි කියලා. දැන් ඊයේ දවස් තුල කිලිනොච්චිය දිස්ත්‍රික්කයේ තුලත් රෝගියෙක් වාර්තා වුණා. ඒ නිසා සමස්ත රට තුලම කොරෝනා රෝගීන් ඉන්නවයි කියන කාරණය ප්‍රකාශයට පත් කරන්න මේ වෙනකොට සිද්ධ වෙලා තියෙනවා.
Safeguard hand sanitizer නවතම නිෂ්පාදන පෙළ නිරෝගීමත් දිවියකට.
Several economic centres in the country which were closed due to the spread of COVID-19 were opened for wholesale trade during the day. In the meantime, the National Operations Centre for Prevention of COVID-19 introduced hotline numbers for the public to contact the centre in any case of a COVID-19 related situation.
Economic centres located in Ratmalana, Bokundara and Narayanpeta were closed recently as a measure to contain the virulent spread of COVID-19 in Colombo. However, they recommenced operations this morning following a decision by the Presidential Task Force on Economic Revival and Poverty Alleviation on the 2nd of November. In the meantime, Minister Mahindananda Alutgamage and State Minister Shashindra Rajapaksa inspected the economic centres during their visits today.
ගොවියෝ අස්සනු නිරන්න නැතුව ඉන්න විකුණ ගන්න බැරි වෙන නිසා දැන් ඔබතුමාට සාතිකයක් දෙන්න පුළුවන් ද ගොවියන්ට දැන් වෙනද පොළකට තියෙනවා ඒගොල්ලන්ට
දැන් මේක උදේ එළවලු කිලෝ ලක්ෂයක් පැය තුනට විකුණනවා කියලා කියන්නේ විශාල ඉල්ලීමක් තියෙනවා. ඒ නිසා කිසි ගැටලුවක් නැහැ බය නැතුව තමන්ගේ නිෂ්පාදන දෙන්න අපිට ගේන්න.
In the meantime, wholesale stores located in Peta, reopened for operations yesterday under strict safety protocols. Meanwhile, Minister of Trade Dr. Bandula Gunawardana and Senior DIG in charge of the Western Province, Deshabandhu Tennakun, arrived at the stores this morning for inspections.
සහල් මේ වෙළඳ පොළට ගෙනල්ලා බාර දෙන මිල විශාල ලෙස වැඩි. ඒතකොට මේ හාල් වල ප්‍රශ්නයට අපි අද පරිභෝග කටයුතු අධිකාරියේ තියෙන විධිවිධාන වලට අනුව යම්කිසි වෙනසක් කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. මොකද උපරිම සිල්ලර මිලට තමයි තොග වෙළඳ පොළටත් මේ හාල් ගෙනල්ලා බාන්නේ. ඒක නොකළ යුතු දෙයක්. ඒ සඳහා අපි ගැසට් නිවේදනයක් නිකුත් කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා අද දිනේදී. සියලුම අත්‍යවශ්‍ය පරිභෝජන භාණ්ඩ හිඟයකින් තොරව ලංකාවටම අවශ්‍ය ප්‍රමාණය තියෙනවා. ඒ නිසා පාරිභෝගික ජනතාව කළ යුතු වෙන්නේ සඳුදාට වෙළඳපොළ විවෘත වීමෙන් පසු කිසි හිඟයකට තොග රැස් කරන්න යන්න අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ නැහැ.
In another development, Colombo District Secretary Pradeep Yasaratna had this to say about the government relief allowance program.
නිරෝධායනය කරන පවුලක පුද්ගලයෙක් ඉන්නවනම් ජීවනෝපාය අහිමි වූ එවැනි පුද්ගලයෙක් ඉන්නවනම් රුපියල් 10000ක වියලි සලාකයේ එහෙම නැත්නම් ආහාර ඔවුන්ට ලබා දීලා තිනවනම් මේ රුපියල් 5000 ජීවනෝපාය අහිමි වීම සඳහා ලබා දෙන දීමනාවට ඔහුට හිමිකමක් නැහැ. මෙවර රජය මගින් තීරණයක් කරන් තිනවා කර්මාන්ත ශාලා එහෙම නැත්නම් ඇඟලුම් මහල් නිරෝධායන ඇඳිලි නීතිය මැද්දේ වුණත් පවත්වාගෙන යාම සඳහා අවසරය ලබා දීලා තිනවා. ඒ නිසා එවැනි ස්ථානවල සේවය කරනවා නම් ගියවර ඒ ප්‍රතිලාභය ලබා ගත්තා නම් එවැනි ස්ථාන වසා තැබීම නිසා මෙවර ඒ හිමිකමක් ලැබෙන්නේ.
In the meantime, the National Operations Centre for the Prevention of COVID-19 outbreak also announced several hotline numbers for the public to contact the centre in the event of a COVID-19 related situation. Accordingly, the deputy officer can be contacted on 011 286 0002, on 011 286 0003 and 011 286 0004. Furthermore, any inquiries via email can be sent to covid195120@gmail.com. What's more, the Navy and Air Force Deputy Officer can be contacted on 011 4055 932. The public can also contact the Epidemiology Unit and the Ministry of Health on 011 368 8664 and 011 3030 864.
Despite COVID-19 infections being reported from within export processing zones, the government decides to keep them running due to its contribution towards the country's foreign exchange balance. As such, the Ministry of Health issued a set of guidelines that must be adhered to by employees of factories within these economic zones during continued operations.
According to last year's economic data, 70% of Sri Lanka's export earnings come from BOI projects amounting to a total of $7.9 billion. The Gampaha district, which has been identified as a COVID-19 high-risk zone, at the moment plays home to 5 export zones that provide employment for over 80,000 people. The zones within the Gampaha district are in Katunayaka, Biyagama, Malvatta, Vatupitivala and Mirigama. In addition to these zones in the Gampaha district, there are more than 350 factories operating outside these zones that are registered with the Board of Investment. Despite high virus numbers in the district and from within the zones as well, the Board of Investment decided not to close down operations at these factories, as doing so would have disastrous economic consequences. In line with this, the Ministry of Health introduced a set of health and safety guidelines to be followed by industries within the export processing zones. These regulations come in addition to the already stipulated health and safety guidelines requiring employees to wear face masks, maintain social distancing and sanitize their hands. Accordingly, the new guidelines require machinery in factories to be cleaned with alcohol-based disinfectants. Further, employees are only allowed to gather in cafeterias while maintaining a 1 meter distance. In addition to this, the guidelines also stipulate a set of precautions to be taken if an employee displays suspicious respiratory symptoms. They require management to immediately quarantine such cases in a room within the factory premises with separate sanitary facilities and to inform the public health inspector in charge of the area. Further measures must also be taken to ensure there is adequate ventilation within the factory complexes. Meanwhile, the details of all employees reporting for daily duties at factories must be maintained accurately to make it easy for officials to track associates. The guidelines also suspended the holding of employee training workshops deemed not necessary. Also made mandatory is disinfection of contact areas on doors every 3 hours while following proper mandated hygiene procedures when disposing of waste, including face masks. The Ministry of Health further restricts any employees who have returned from overseas to be permitted on the premises without a valid quarantine certificate. Further, all contacts of an employee diagnosed as a COVID-19 patient must be identified and quarantined. Such contacts are restricted from returning to their duties until completing the mandatory 14-day quarantine period, despite having a negative PCR test result. Further, factory management are also required to close off all areas frequented by the identified patient within the last 48 hours until they are cleaned and disinfected. The Ministry of Health also requires the entire factory complex to be closed down for 48 hours and disinfected if more than one employee tests positive for the virus.
More news on the other side of this break. Stay tuned.
Ceylon Bank, the bank with a heart.
Welcome back. In more news, 18 members of the Parliamentary Committee on Public Finance were appointed yesterday and ratified through a vote in Parliament. It will consist of 11 opposition parliamentarians and 7 government ministers to provide oversight on government expenditure.
Speaker of Parliament Mahinda Yapa Abeyewardene announced the names of the 18 members appointed to the Committee on Public Finance for the 9th Parliament yesterday. The members approved for the committee are Ministers Dr. Bandula Gunawardena, Dr. Nalaka Godaheva, Kehelia Ramukwella, Susil Premajayanta, D.V. Chanaka, Vidura Vikramanayaka, and Dr. Sarath Virasekara. The committee also includes MPs Anura Priyadarshana Yapa, Vijata Herath, Dilan Pereira, Dr. Harsha De Silva, M.A. Sumandiran, Chaminda Vijay Siri, Heisha Vitanage, Isuru Langoda, Anupa Pasquale, Sahan Pradeep Vitana, and Professor Ranjit Bandara. Further, a proposal made by its members to appoint a chairperson for the committee at its committee meeting was passed in Parliament. However, not many people actually know what the Committee on Public Finance is and what exactly its responsibilities are. The Committee on Public Finance consists of a chair and 17 members nominated by another parliamentary committee, the Committee of Selection, but provided that the chair is a member of the opposition. The duties of the committee are basically to function as an oversight committee that is expected to study and report to Parliament on the collection of government revenue under Article 148 of the Constitution, all payments from the government's consolidated fund, the utilization of public funds for specific purposes by law, and the application of public funds, as well as the recessions of appropriations contained in the Appropriations Act for the current year, the transfer of appropriation, and the unexpected balance. Its duties also include oversight on the implementation of the Appropriation Act for the current year, public debt and debt service. Its duties also include oversight on the implementation of the Appropriation Act for the current year, public debt and public service, as well as reports and statements under the Fiscal Management Responsibility Act No. 3 of 2003. The committee is also expected to draft periodic interim reports and report to Parliament within 6 weeks of the appropriation bill being tabled whether the government's fund allocation is in line with its policies. In addition, the committee is also in charge of submitting a report to Parliament on the fiscal, financial and economic assumptions used as the basis in arriving at total estimated expenditure and revenue proposed in the budget and appropriation bill.
We'll return after this short commercial break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In your international news, the race to the White House is currently neck and neck, with Democratic candidate Joe Biden leading incumbent President Donald Trump in the number of electoral votes. As of now, Biden has 238 to Trump's 213, with millions more votes waiting to be counted.
The US presidential elections are one of the most widely watched presidential toss-ups, not only in the United States, but the world over. But this year's election seems to have garnered a bit more global attention than in previous years. As of now, the race is neck and neck, with incumbent President Donald Trump and Democratic presidential candidate former Obama-era Vice President Joe Biden locked in a tight battle for decisive states where millions of votes are yet to be counted. However, President Donald Trump's Twitter post claiming victory, accusing the Democrats of attempting to steal the election from him and calling for voting to be halted, may be a huge cause for concern. Trump's tweet was flagged by Twitter as disputed and possibly misleading about an election or other civic processes. The US president then appeared at the White House, where he called the election a fraud being perpetrated against the American people that he aims to challenge in the country's highest court.
A very sad group of people is trying to disenfranchise that group of people, and we won't stand for it. We will not stand for it. This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. So our goal now is to ensure the integrity for the good of this nation. This is a very big moment. This is a major fraud in our nation. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots. It's a very sad moment. To me, this is a very sad moment. And we will win this. And as far as I'm concerned, we already have won it.
Earlier on Sunday at a campaign event in Philadelphia, Biden responded to reports that Trump was planning on declaring victory early on Election Day if he has a minor lead, saying that his response to the president is that he will not be allowed to steal the election. At an official address in Wilmington, Delaware, Biden told his supporters that they have to be patient in waiting for election results.
We knew this was going to go long, but who knew we're going to go into maybe tomorrow morning, maybe even longer. But look, we feel good about where we are. We really do. I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election. We knew because of the unprecedented early vote and the mail-in vote that it's going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying the votes is finished. And it ain't over till every vote is counted. Every ballot is counted. It's not my place or Donald Trump's place to declare who's won this election. That's the decision of the American people.
Meanwhile, one aspect of the US election system that remains a grey area for Sri Lankans is the concept of electoral votes determining the ultimate winner. The Electoral College is a compromise between the election of the president by a vote in Congress and the election of the president by a popular vote of qualified citizens. The Electoral College process consists of the selection of the electors and the meeting of the electors where they vote for the president and vice president and the counting of the electoral votes by Congress. The Electoral College consists of 538 electors, where a majority of 270 electoral votes is required to elect the president. States have the same number of electors as they do members in their congressional delegation, one for each member in the House of Representatives, plus 2 senators. With that, given the results so far, Joe Biden leads with 238 electoral votes and incumbent President Donald Trump with 213. This gives Joe Biden a 50% share of the votes, amounting to 69,110,879, while Donald Trump has 48.4% with 66,828,238 votes. Meanwhile, in our ongoing coverage of the US presidential elections today, several experts expressed their views on the current process.
I think there's bipartisan support for the containment of China. So I don't think that there's going to be much change. If at all, I think there'll be some optics might change where they might question human rights in Kashmir, for example. And then it's a natural enemy of China. So my enemy's enemy is my friend. So I think that's the policy. I think in terms of even India and Sri Lanka, I don't think much of change will happen.
Between China's Belt and Road initiative and America's established maritime presence in South Asia, there is for Sri Lanka a geostrategic dilemma that we're in. So we're looking at economic diplomacy here. We're looking at ways to come out of this situation. So globally, we did see with the Trump administration that there were protectionist policies, protecting their trade, protecting their own economy. So
Pompeo came at a time when the 2 officials from the US who's deciding foreign policy and security policy meeting up with the 2 officials who's the prime drivers of foreign policy and security policy in India. This time when they came, they signed the visa, which means they are going to share geospatial strategic information, which means Indian missiles are going to be more accurate and more lethal in the region.
I'd like to sort of rephrase how you put it in terms of it was not our intent to frame it as this power, but we have no intention of really being sandwiched in between this power play between the United States and China. We've always been a non-aligned country. We were one of the founding members, and we have this policy of neutrality in our foreign policy as well. And what we want to do is work with all these countries for the benefit of our own country.
Well, we still don't know who the next president of the United States is, but whatever said and done, what do you think the approach of Sri Lanka is going to be, whoever comes, whether it's, are we going to sign the MCC, are we going to pander to their request, what's going to happen, sir?
Well, I think no matter who wins the presidential race in America, it may not really impact Sri Lanka. because it's not like in Sri Lanka every time a political change take place, our policies also change. Their policies will continue no matter who comes to the White House or who goes back to the White House.
With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. I'm Shanila Fernando. Have a good night.